Hello, my friends, and welcome to Bunratty Castle. Now, Bunratty Castle is attached to a replica village that reminds me a lot of Greenfield Village attached to the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. Now, this bottom floor is fairly thinly defended. It's the basement of the castle. And what's fascinating is it doesn't actually connect to the rest of the castle. It was just used as a stables. That door goes nowhere. It's just a door hung on the wall. It has one entrance, which is also the egress, and it is a fairly isolated space. But it is not undefended because if you look up, there's a murder hole. Yay, castle technology. So this is a 15th century castle dating to about 1425. It was originally built by the occupying English, but almost immediately taken by the O'Brien clan of Irish local descent. Coming in here, we are entering the ground floor main guard. This is the room where the modern castle hosts their banquets, which I imagine are a lot of fun. And I have several friends on social media who have mentioned having attended such at the castle. Now, it's a really interesting space, and I really wish that I'd had an instrument with me because I would have liked to have tested the acoustics. This vaulted sort of space tends to do really cool things, and there's a minstrel gallery. How cool is that? Now, this in period probably wasn't a banqueting hall, and so I'm not certain why there's a minstrel gallery here when there's not one in the Great Hall later on. But there also is, in keeping with this being a guard room, a dungeon. And so down this weird curvy staircase, you find basically a hole in the ground, a good old-fashioned oubliette. And of course, being a dark, damp space, it's a little hard to get a picture of, but I did manage to use the night vision and get a decent shot of the space. Now we're going to continue up these spiral staircases. And of course, according to everything I've ever read, spiral staircases twist direction X or direction Y to hamper the sword arms of the people who are trying to come up and to free up the sword arms of the people defending who are facing down. However, this particular castle has a number of staircases, and I haven't been able to discover a pattern in whether they twirl left or right, because they do both. So whatever theory is behind the direction of a spiral staircase in medieval castles, no one told this architect. And here we are in the Great Hall, which is great. Of course, you have these amazing window seats, which I just think are fantastic. And I can just imagine curling up with a book there for days. And it's a fascinating glimpse with the anterooms here of what day-to-day life in the castle was like. For example, here is the kitchen right off of the Great Hall, which makes a lot of sense. You'll notice the Great Hall itself is heated by a single hearth in the middle of the floor. So good old-fashioned communal experience, living space, and etc. And just that fascinating fire in the middle of the floor that should be superseded by this point. You'll notice there were chimneys and fireplaces throughout the castle, but this particular hearth has no such thing, and I just find that an amazing little facet of history. We head upstairs, and now we're into the various living chambers in the castle. This is the Earl's bedroom, and the carved wooden writing table and the dress are the highlights of this room. The beading on that dress in particular, if you want to go back and check that out, is likely 15th century. The description is a little vague, but says Her Ladyship, which implies the wife of the Earl, and I'm not sure what the feminized title for Earl is. And this is the Earl's solar, which is the private apartment of the Earl. The oak paneling is the 15th century, and this table here is reputed to be salvaged lumber from a shipwreck from the Spanish Armada. Because how cool is that? Now, the female figurines that are hanging from the ceiling here are throughout the castle. There are several of them. They are called Lecturwipken or something like that. It is a German origin carving, and I'm pretty sure I just brutally murdered that word. But they are basically chandeliers. And here we have a window down into the Great Hall. Now, the Great Hall, in addition to being the main celebratory and communal space of the castle, was also where justice was handed out. And according to one of the docents of the castle, women were not allowed to be part of those proceedings. So the fact that there is a window from the apartment onto the Great Hall was one of the big ways that the lady of the house and her ladies in waiting would be able to keep track of what was going on in the court. And the views here are really cool. And again, I just love these these window seats that are just delightful. And now we're going to head upstairs to a room which hasn't been particularly furnished, but keeps going to some more interesting things. And up we go, up into the tower, until we reach the roof level, where we have the view out onto the countryside. And of course, the river is the key defensive point that the castle is protecting, it being a vital communication and trading link to the surrounding communities. Now, the view, again, is stunning, although it does include a modern carriageway motorway. And if you look at the way that the steps are constructed and built into the walls in order to access the higher points, it's fascinating to me. But here, back in the Great Hall, we are going to continue up into the guest bedroom and the South Sol, or the guest apartments, which I think is the piece de resistance of the entire castle, between the replica Tudor ceiling, and behind that red chair, there is a virginal, an itty-bitty harpsichord. Thank you very much for joining me on my tour of Bunratty Castle. Thank you so much for your patronage. I deeply appreciate you, and have a beautiful weekend.